Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining today's Kentucky Youth-Led Advocacy and Mentoring Town Hall, which, as you know, is part of a series on youth-led advocacy and mentoring. My name is Adriana Licea. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Mentor, and I'll be introducing today's really incredible panel. Just a little bit of housekeeping information before we start. 1 week after this webinar, all attendees will receive an email with instructions on how to download and access the webinar recording, and then a link to some more resources on Youth Advocates for Mentoring and civics education as well. As today, all attendees are muted for best sound, but that doesn't mean you're not interacting with us. Please type any questions you have for the panelists in the questions box, and we will answer all your questions during the Q&A. So just to give you some grounding in today's webinar, it's really rooted in the strong belief that Mentor National has had really deeply ingrained into our work, that young people should be at the center of policy and advocacy change, and that young people do not exist in vacuums, right? Advocacy, policy change, elections, everything affects them. And mentors really have a critical role in growing aside young people and then learning about their advocacy passions and helping to ignite them as well. So we know that when young people activate on advocacy and policy, their self-confidence grows, their sense of leadership grows, and of course they make an impact on the world around them, which is so critical. So our role as mentors is to really support that work. You may know that about over a year ago now, Mentor started a program called Youth Advocates for Mentoring, and that's a program that actually trains 12 young people from throughout the country on grassroots advocacy, policy, and making change in their communities. And so, each young person in this program was either formally a part of a mentoring program or had an impactful mentor, and they spent the year really understanding policy issues, advocacy issues, and writing a policy memo about topics that are really important to them and to the world. And so I would just like to say that, today I really have a privilege of introducing two of them, two are really wonderful youth advocates from Kentucky, as they share their perspectives on youth-led advocacy, on civic engagements, on mentoring, and really on how adults can be more meaningful partners in advocacy and policy work. So I will say one of our youth advocates is having a little bit of issue with her camera, so we're going to hopefully be able to have her on camera, but we may not have her on camera for the entire time. To get started, though, I'd love to ask Kendall to come on camera and just tell us, Kendall, a little bit about yourself, who you are, what your policy memo topic was, and then why you decided to apply for Youth Advocates for Mentoring.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kendall Miller. I go to high school and I'm also enrolled in a community college in my community. And my policy memo was on strengthening support for children with parents who have a substance misuse issue. And I really decided to join Youth Advocates for Mentoring because I wanted a platform to share my passion for advocacy, and I wanted to kind of get my foot in the door, but I never really knew how. And Youth Advocates for Mentoring really helped facilitate that first step.
And Grace would love to hear more about you as well.
Hi, my name is Grace Ethlin, and I'm 21 years old. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I currently go to Bellarmine University, where I'm studying environmental science, and I have a minor in anthropology as well. I was in Louisville Girls Leadership when I was in high school, but I also have had a lot of mentorship programs during college, and also I'm a mentor right now for freshman students and veteran students in my academic peer coach position at Bellarmine. So I wanted to join Youth Advocates because with my environmental background, there's a lot of grassroots work to do. And this program could give me some of the tools to really move forward with that in the future. So then I guess we'll go on and move into the webinar itself. So I have my questions over to the side. So if I'm looking over here, that's why I'm doing it. But at first, our question is, what youth-led advocacy or movements are happening in Kentucky, and how or have any of them inspired my own work? Kendall, did you want to go first, or do you want me to just, I guess I can shoot first if you want.
I can go and you can kind of build off what I was going to say, because I think you personally have a very strong connection to this since you're from Louisville. But I wanted to say, me and Grace both had to do a little bit of research for this question, which I think kind of speaks a lot about kind of the climate and what's going on in Kentucky right now. But also something that's kind of been more on the news, more kind of a thing, is of course the Black Lives Matter movement that has been, especially a huge thing in Kentucky, especially in Louisville, because of the tragic murder of Breonna Taylor. And through kind of me watching that happen, I would definitely say that it's mainly youth-led, like definitely mainly youth-led. I feel like the youth are the most involved, especially when it comes to, actively engaging in things like protesting. Like, for example, I've seen, people at my own school, going to courthouses, going to the police stations, and, getting shot at with rubber bullets, and, seeing these videos and stuff of people, that I know. So that's what I think, that is one of kind of the main movements that has been going on, and kind of the most relevant movement, especially considering, today's climate. But I kind of wanted to ask Grace, since she is actually from Louisville herself, so she probably has more firsthand experience in, witnessing youth and what exactly they're doing.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting past 6 months. There's a lot of will behind, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement, but also what I've been seeing a lot too in recent years is awareness around climate change and environmental movements as well. I think that Kentucky is a really interesting state because we're seen as this coal state, and that's like a big reputation that we've had for many, many years and generations. But now that we're kind of moving away from coal as a country and more towards natural gas, that's something that I think we're still holding on to in our state is coal country and our reputation, like I said. So there's a lot more environmental awareness around mountaintop removal and coal workers' rights. And I've seen a lot of talks in some of my own classes, but also in the community as well here in Louisville. But yeah, there's been a lot of protesting. I think a lot more young people I've seen, like middle schoolers and some grade schoolers even, who are starting this long journey of what is my voice and how do I want to use it. So it's very interesting seeing like people who are so young grasp onto these really big movements that I probably would have been intimidated myself when I was younger. So I'm glad to see that, but I'm also like super empowered by it too.
And just moving on from that, another question that I kind of wanted to ask, and Grace can build on this, is what are some strategies you think mentors could use to help young people feel more heard in their environments? And this kind of directly ties in with our last question, and youth actually, being actively engaged in youth activism.
Yeah, I wanted to pull the book that we looked at in our Youth Advocates program. It was like the first assignment that we had at the beginning of this long 10-month journey. And I have it right here. It's called Critical Mentoring. And I think that this book is just really amazing because it talks about giving the voice to the mentees and letting them do the planning, letting them talk about what issues are so important to them. A lot of times guest speakers might enter the room, or the people who are in charge, but like leading the mentorship programs have done really incredible things, but sometimes the conversations are really filled with their successes and achievements and not as much about what the mentees really need and want to bolster their voices. So this book is really great at kind of asking some of the questions and saying, like, these are maybe even specific groups of mentorship programs that need specific attention and specific space to really talk about what they want to accomplish, instead of just having somebody speak about it for them or assume even.
Yeah, and just kind of to build on that, like exactly what Grace was talking about, that book does like an amazing job at detailing how, you know, letting youth take the steering wheel. I think oftentimes mentors or even just older people in general may get like so caught up in like, I have to help you, I have to give you like these clear guidelines on like what you have to do, or you know, there's like a set kind of list of rules to follow, and you know, there's really not when it comes to advocacy. And like what Grace was saying, just let the youth kind of do what they want to do, and you know, provide them support when they ask for it, you know, or you know, simple things like if they're feeling, you know, upset, or they may be feeling confused about something, like just being there for them. I don't necessarily think that, you know, the mentor has to be the leading one when it comes to advocacy.
Our next question is, what are some examples of mentoring programs in Kentucky who are leading the way on youth-led advocacy? I really love this question. I want to hear what you have to say, Kendall. I know we had to do a little bit of research each, but yeah.
Yeah, so I actually did a little bit of research for this, like I said, and I came across a really cool mentoring program that kind of created this program actually as soon as the pandemic started, and they kind of created it in a response to the pandemic, and it's called Kentucky Youth Lead, and LEAD stands for learning, leading, engaging, and activating. And advocating, and it's really cool what they did. So they had 9 youth from 9 different counties in Kentucky actually come together, you know, not in person, but online, and talk about an issue that each of their counties were facing, that was directly related to the pandemic. And they came together to actually come up with solutions so they can, you know, better advocate for their community and get, you know, the residents in their community the stuff they need. And I personally thought this was amazing, and I've never heard of it, which is so sad. But I honestly think that directly that kind of speaks volumes about kind of mentoring programs in general in Kentucky, and kind of the lack of promoting and the lack of awareness that most people have. Like for example, my mentoring program, most people in my school have no idea about it, even though it's based in my school, which is the crazy part. And I think that can speak kind of a lot about maybe the hesitancy to speak about mentoring programs, which we'll kind of get into later in this webinar, I think. But Grace, I'm curious to learn about what you have researched and found.
I think that's so cool that you found that program, Kendall, but I really also liked what you said about hesitancy. I was a part of Louisville Girls Leadership when I was in high school, and I worked on their steering committee for 2 years after that, because it's only like a 1-year program. It's based in Louisville. It's all girls from all different high schools, public and private, throughout the city, all in Jefferson County, and I think a couple of counties on the outskirts as well. But every single year, there's a difficulty in getting nominations from these high schools. And this year in particular, I still follow them on social media, but they're having a hard time filling their spots. And it's all based on counselors or friends, family members, adults who are nominating these girls to be in this program. And it's really fully comprehensive. It's a great program. I love it. But I think that that's still a consistent thing where people are nervous to join or nervous to nominate people because they don't know exactly what they're going to get. But then I was thinking about two other really established programs, which are the CUNA and KYA programs. The Kentucky United Nations Academy or Association is the CUNA one, and then KYA is the Kentucky Advocates, I think it is. I'm sorry, I could have just butchered that. But either way, I had a lot of friends who did it in high school, and it's all about policy and advocacy in politics and also representation. So it's really a beautiful program for people who might want to be in grassroots organizing, but also just learning about government as well, which I didn't really take part in when I was in high school, but I wish I had.
Yeah, I completely forgot about KYA. A lot of my friends actually went. It's Kentucky Youth Assembly. It's really cool. You get to make like your own law, and then it gets like passed up. And it's a super cool thing, and it actually has a chance to become a real law if you get like high enough in the program, which is really cool. My AP government didn't pick me to join them there, which is really sad, but you know, it's fine. Yeah, okay. Anyways, we're gonna move on to the next question. And this kind of directly ties in, you know, we're talking about mentoring programs that support youth advocacy. So what are some common practices of youth mentoring that are the most and least effective in nurturing youth voice and youth-led advocacy?
I loved this question because I feel like I've seen both sides of the coin. I love our Youth Advocates program because I really love having my voice heard and somebody to ask me, like, what are your needs right now? What do you want to see? But especially with like my personal mentors in my life, whether that be my college advisors or a couple professors that I'm really close with, I'm always asked, what are your boundaries for your goals? And where do you see yourself in 1, 5, or 10 years? I think boundaries are a great topic that people forget about. And sometimes mentoring programs can kind of push them, which is great, but it can also open up some wounds for youth or some other maybe insecurities that youth may have. So it's always important to just ask, like, what are you comfortable with and what do you really want to get out of this that fits your needs and doesn't push you too much out of your comfort zone. I think as far as least productive, like I said before, discussions that involve like, this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I accomplished, and you should do it too. Youth need a road path. They need a simple step-by-step, like this is what we need to see or what you can do. This is what we can see in you. And if you're only talking about achievements and not really giving like suggestions or holding their hand seriously, like you can lose a lot of youth because of this. The assumptions can be really jarring for youth, and I think it's important to give them a space where they're comfortable and they feel like they can trust you, and that you're not always just going to talk about your own achievements, which may be great, but they can be a temporary inspiration and not the focus of every conversation, for sure.
Yeah, I personally super duper agree with this. I feel like boundaries are such a hard thing to navigate, especially when people feel super uncomfortable with talking about them. But I think that's all just, you know, collective learning about the importance of them and, you know, how they could really help facilitate great communication and comfortable communication. Um, and with that, you know, Grace also mentioned assumptions. And like as a young person, personally, yes, I've experienced that so much, and so many young people experience that. The assumptions, whether it be about, you know, what you're feeling because of like the current political climate, or like experiences you may have because of like your gender, your race, your ethnicity, so many different things. I've personally had mentors who just don't really know how to navigate that and have personally made me kind of very uncomfortable. So I really think in terms of strategies is just for the mentor to take a step back and kind of learn and listen to the mentee. Um, like Grace was saying, it can be super duper jarring when, you're already kind of assuming stuff about me when you don't know me at all, just because, I'm a young person or because of, certain traits about me. Um, so I think it's very important for the mentor, I think sometimes when you think of like a mentor-mentee relationship, you think of the mentor kind of taking charge and, facilitating most things. But I feel like in all actuality, it's super important for the mentor, like we stated before, to let the mentee kind of lead the relationship and kind of let the mentee kind of shape the relationship and, to what they want, what they want out of it. Because, not every mentee is going to want like a super strong emotional connection, while some mentees do really want that super strong emotional connection. It's we're people, we're humans, and our needs and wants definitely differ, and definitely will change depending, on our circumstances. So I think it's very important, to listen to your mentee, to learn with your mentee, not to act like, everything, or you're going to be the one taking the reins in the relationship, and trying to help, and through that listening, through that learning, you will kind of facilitate an environment in which your mentee will definitely be more comfortable.
Yeah, awesome. Further explanation there, Kendall. I love that. Really diving into it. And so our next question kind of goes along with that is, what is one thing that your mentor did that helped sustain or ignite your efforts in advocacy?
I love this question so much because it gives me an excuse to talk about this thing that my mentor did. I really love her. She's great. My mentor, me and her are kind of the same person, but I was so intimidated when I first met her because she works for like this big law company. She works for like one of the top lawyers, one of the top, finance attorneys in Kentucky. And I was so nervous. I was like, oh my goodness, she's so smart. Oh no, how can I communicate with this person? But we found out we're just the same person. We share our passion for education and advocacy and fighting for those who don't have a voice. So we got closer, kind of. Oh, I've known her since my sophomore year in high school, and I remember it was final season, and I was also doing my policy memo for Youth Advocates for Mentoring at the same time. So I was stressed. Like, I was so stressed. I couldn't eat, I could barely sleep. I was so worried about getting things done, and I was so worried. I remember, like, I would sit awake at night and I would tell myself, I am not qualified to do this. I am, I'm a child. There are so many people who know more about this topic than I do. So who do I think, I am talking about this? I don't want to misrepresent anyone. I was just a nervous wreck. I couldn't do anything. And I remember it was one day, this was pre-pandemic, after we went to dinner together, and we were just sitting in the car in front of my house, and it was like 7 o'clock. And she was like, I was telling her about, how I could barely eat, about how, I just constantly felt nauseous, that, I was so worried about everything that, was affecting my physical health. And I remember something she told me. She just was like, Kendall, this is not the hardest thing that you've ever done in your life. This was not the hardest thing you've ever had to do. So you are completely and entirely capable of doing this. And I remember I just sat there and I was like, wow, yeah, that's exactly right. Because, it wasn't the hardest thing I'd ever done. And, maybe that sounds sort of blunt, but it's definitely what I needed in that moment, is just, that grounding. Like, hey, this isn't the end of the world. You know, this isn't the end of the world. You know, there will be harder things probably in my future. I've experienced harder things in my past, you know, and I will survive it, you know, and I think that really kind of pays a testament to um, kind of the spirit of what a mentor is and, you know, their role um, in anyone's lives, you know, just to be that grounding person, that anchor, you know, to not necessarily give me all the answers, but, you know, to be there for me as I try to figure them out, you know, myself. So.
Absolutely. I am 100% a crier if anybody knows me, like more than surface level. So, I mean, I'm just speaking honestly here. Like, I just cry whenever I'm stressed, whenever I'm overwhelmed. Like, at least you know my emotions. I don't hide them. And I was having actually, I mean, this person's been really constant throughout my like college education. But I also have my mentors through youth advocates that I love and tap into as well. But I'm thinking of my professor in particular. He's like my advisor for my minor. And this semester has been really, really tough for me. For the first time, I'm realizing like my plan is actually changing a lot. And that's because we're in a pandemic, like things just aren't the same. And it's really okay. But he asked me, I hadn't seen him all semester, and he's like, "Oh, how are you doing?" I was like, "No, don't ask." But he was like, "Be honest with me, like really share how you're feeling." I totally got teary-eyed, but I was glad that somebody asked me to be honest and to not shy away from some of those emotions because I feel things very deeply. I feel stress very deeply. I feel creativity very deeply, like the whole nine. And it was important for someone to say, like, you can talk to me and really built that trust with me as well. Um, and then kind of encouraged me, like, what's one thing that you can drop or one thing that you can remind yourself of this week that's okay that you drop as well. So if I don't go to grad school right away, if I look for some other situation in my life that's still going to be moving forward in some way, like that's progress. Progress is progress. But when I look to my mentor, that's what I really need to hear is that everything I'm doing right now, everything that I'll be doing next week is exactly what's perfect for me and my situation. So I love my mentor for that reason, and I need him because of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And just kind of going on a slightly different path here about, you know, we're talking about like kind of Grace was talking about her mentor was her professor. So I feel like this is kind of a very important question to ask is how can both mentoring and youth-led advocacy play a larger role in the education system in schools?
When I think about back to my high school experience and also just like needs of high school or like my first year students that I work with now, kind of coming from senior year that was a lot different. And now they're into this freshman year that's a lot different than what they ever expected. The most like common theme that I see is career and higher education, just assurance that they're doing the right thing right now. I think what mentorship programs in schools can really show is like you test the waters for a couple years until you figure out like what you really are meant to be doing. And it's okay if your path changes. So the same things that I was passionate about in high school, like I still care about, but they aren't on my forefront now because I've changed, I've developed, had different life experiences. So I think that that's a constant when we're talking about like college prep or career readiness in high school and middle school too, going into high school and preparing for college or trade school, whatever it may be. Just really encouraging that you don't have to have your major figured out. You don't have to have your career set up. There needs to be a lot of trust building. For my high school experience, it was like your counselor was the person who was kind of mentoring you. And I don't think that I ever spoke to her one time. I was a transfer student into my junior year, and I had good grades, so there was just no reason for her to ever reach out to me. And I understand, like, I was in a public school, so there's a lot of different students who may have more needs than me. But I wish that I had had someone telling me, like, if you don't know exactly what you're going to do, these are some paths you can go down to test it out, but absolutely don't feel pressured to know everything right now. So I think we just need a little bit more like close relationships. And Kendall mentioned earlier, like some students love close relationships and some don't. But I think at least having a little bit of trust and willingness to say, like, tell me a little bit about your story, about your background. That's really important for understanding who the youth person really is.
Yeah, Grace actually like really touched on something, and we were talking about this before about the assumptions of like what I need. Um, like personally, I work like super duper hard to be able to get good grades in school, and I think oftentimes counselors kind of look at that and they're like, okay, you're fine. You're fine. You don't need any help at all. And it's just like, help, like I'm doing this by myself. um but I was super thankful for my mentoring coordinator to actually reach out to me and ask me if I was interested in having a mentor. And in terms of what mentoring organizations can actually do, personally my mentoring organization um, was really never involved in youth advocacy at all. They were involved in the the process of like applying for grants and stuff, but they were never at all super interested in what youth were doing. And it's really funny because they have like they have their board where they make decisions on the mentoring program, and they have youth on the board, but we don't ever really get to talk that much. So I think just starting out, letting youth talk about what they care about and what changes they want to make. And honestly, like truly, I believe maybe mentoring programs are sort of scared, or they just don't know how to go about the process of advocacy in general. But I think as long as they just serve as a platform for youth to use, and the youth can, like I said, take the reins themselves. Like for example, like I said, my mentoring program personally at my school was never really involved with youth advocacy. But once, I published my actual policy memo, and that was written and, I presented it to my congressional representatives, my mentoring program was like, oh, hey, that's like a pretty cool thing you're doing there. Like, what can we do to help? And I'm just like, send it out. You guys have connections, send it out somewhere, or send it to the school officials so they can read my policy recommendations. And we've kind of been going through that process of sending my policy recommendations out to people who can actually do something about them. And I think honestly, even just that is like a super huge first step in getting involved in youth advocacy, is just letting the youth do their thing and promoting it.
Yeah, awesome point. It's all about support, and support can come in a lot of different ways, but as long as that's like the constant theme, then that's definitely what matters. Our next question is, what are some emotions and circumstances that may hold youth back from entering mentoring programs and discussing their advocacy issues or passions?
This is a great question. Like I said, I'm in my mentoring program. I'm super heavily involved in recruiting new mentees. And I always ask people, I'll ask like my friends or, my peers, and I'm just like, hey, you should get involved in the mentoring program. And they're all like, no, not happening. And I'm like, why? Because like to me, it's just like my mentor is amazing, and like I've gotten so much out of that relationship, you know, and I've learned so much. So, you know, why don't you? And then I realized like a lot of people have never had a relationship like that before, or have never had to be vulnerable with somebody, like never ever. And I think they kind of, I think when people my age hear the word mentor, they sort of freak out because, you know, they think of it as like I have to tell my whole life story to this person and they have to know everything about me and I don't know who this person is and I'm not ready for that, which is of course super valid, obviously. And like me and Grace were talking about, you know, you're going to want, different people are going to want, you know, different things from, you know, a mentor and mentee relationship. And I think like I said, mentoring is not promoted really that well, especially like in my community. It's not. So it's the different facets of it, you know, the different relationships that could be had, nobody knows. You know, they kind of see it as this kind of one track thing where like I have to tell this person everything and they're gonna judge my whole life. And you know, that's it. People think that, I think. And I honestly think that prevents a lot of young people from, you know, getting involved in mentoring programs because, you know, the vulnerability, I'm sorry, being vulnerable is scary, right? It is. It's super scary. Nobody is super willing to be like, hey, I'm gonna cry my heart out, or I'm gonna tell you everything I care about. You know, that just doesn't really happen, especially when it comes to, you know, an adult you don't really have any prior experience of meeting before. So I think honestly that is those are some really huge factors that prevent youth from getting involved.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same points kind of written down in my notes. And one of the things that I think about too, now that we're in a pandemic world, is do people have technology available at home? Do they have reliable Wi-Fi? Do they even know how to work Zoom or some of these other modems? It's really difficult learning all of that, and it's something that you learn over time. So being really patient with youth as they navigate this time, figuring out how to talk, unmuting themselves and muting themselves again, and just simple things like that, well, they seem simple to me, but I know 6 months ago when I was doing it for classes and our webinars and stuff, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So it's good to be patient and to be understanding and maybe show some tutorials or reminders about extending deadlines or something like that that really don't put stress on the youth any more than they already feel. And then another thing I thought of for my Louisville Girls leadership experience was in some ways affluence, but also just the ability to have the free time to come to meetings. Our meetings were always on Saturdays and Sundays. Sometimes there was like a lock-in event that would happen the whole weekend. And a lot of the girls had to miss parts of it or an entire weekend because they couldn't get a ride there. So the location of the mentoring program is also crucial, making sure that people can really get there. Yes, it might be the weekend, but this also might be when their parents are working or when their other siblings are working, or maybe even when they have to work to help provide for themselves. So kind of taking a poll and asking, like, what's the best resource for you? Do we need to have online meetings? That's one of the great things about our Youth Advocates for Mentoring program, is that they took care of all of our travel to Washington, D.C. when we first all met each other. And I really appreciated that, because I know I wouldn't have been able to participate had that been put on me, or like my family members to take off work and make that happen for me. But also because we were meeting online, it was a lot more flexible, and I didn't have to worry about taking time off work or school or something like that to be with my cohort. I could sign on and learn how to use some of these mediums, and it was very, very helpful. So I think having flexibility in that way, like really thinking down to a T, what do people have available at home? And then what do we need to provide for the youth to make sure that they're getting the same or a similar experience to other students that may already have a computer, Wi-Fi, and parents with, or family members with like a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job. And then also I think kind of hitting on time management is important too. If you're working with like high school students, procrastination is definitely a thing, and college too. So when we were in our policy memo stages, I definitely needed like hard deadlines and things to hold me accountable. And that really taught me about time management, but it also kind of pushed my buttons because I'm not really a procrastinator, but I also was like, this policy memo is freaking hard to write. I don't know if I want to write it right now on a Friday night. So I needed those hard deadlines because some people have like serious time management issues, and you can't just leave it all up to them to figure out and navigate on their own, for sure.
Yeah, and kind of going along with that, so we're talking about, helping youth advocate for the issues that they care about. But how would you suggest advocating for an issue when it feels like the majority of those around you may not support your cause, or maybe just don't even care about it?
This is something that I deal with a lot, because I'm an environmental major. In some ways, it makes me sound like I'm some hippy dippy girl who's like, oh, I just love hugging trees on my free time. I promise that's not what I learn about in class. But it is difficult, especially when you're working against some systems like within our own state that are for economic gain reasons. It leads to decimating some parts of the ecosystem. And I think that there is give and take there, but still it's a hard cause to kind of advocate, not even against, but just to say like, this is a way that we can do it better, because a lot of people are like, well, why is the way that we're doing it now an issue? So of course, finding common ground is always important. And I think that youth advocates, like, they really hit it home for us, is like, no matter what your issue is, no matter what your state is, you need to be able to appeal to everybody and say, this is why you should care about it. So a personal story is great. I know I always had my personal story to come back to at the end of the day as to like why I still want to do this, why I still feel like this is my calling and purpose. But you kind of have to stay strong sometimes and just tell yourself that your why is bigger than other people's questions about why not. So really trusting in yourself is also important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And similar to Grace, I've also had an issue that's kind of been hard to kind of navigate through and advocate for, in my community especially. So one huge thing that kind of gets in the way is stigmas when it comes to, certain issues. For example, like I said before, I advocate for children with parents with a substance misuse issue, and this I face so many roadblocks because oftentimes, like, I've seen so many times in my community, like somebody who's suffering from a substance misuse problem, and the common response is to laugh at them, or like shake your head, or just ignore them, without really thinking of like that person, of them being a human being, or the the children they might have. So I've definitely experienced this firsthand a lot. And sort of one of the big things that I learned, a big takeaway for me in the Youth Advocates for Mentoring program, is educating to advocate, to kind of get rid of these stigmas that may surround your issue. You have to talk about your issue. You have to, explain the science behind it. You have to explain, people's personal experiences behind it. I don't know if you guys have seen, that the TED Talk, The Dangers of a Single Story, but yes, the having a single story of an issue is dangerous. It truly is, because it only allows, one perspective on an issue, and that one perspective harms a lot of people, and prevents, advocacy from being effective. So, sort of like Grace was saying, find common ground with people and educate them. Don't do it in like a condescending way, because of course nobody is going to respond well to being, feeling like, you're trying to call them dumb. But, we just, to recognize that we all have things to learn in this climate, in this environment, about every sort of issue. Not everyone can be an expert on everything, and just, being open with people, being honest about your issue, and, just educating, and I personally feel like that's one of the best ways to be effective in navigating in an environment that may not be the best. So that kind of, yeah.
Okay, so we will move on to our second to last question, which is on days you may be doubting yourself and your work, how do you stay grounded and motivate yourself to keep going?
Yeah, sorry, I think I was supposed to ask that question. I apologize. Yeah, so I'm sorry. Um, this is always a great question. I think it's super important to talk about in terms of youth advocacy, because I feel like oftentimes we put all of this pressure on ourselves. Like me and Grace, we've been talking, about the countless examples of, either us crying or us not being able to eat, or, us freaking out when it came to, our policy in our advocacy. So it's super important to take care of yourself. And I was speaking about this to someone actually recently. And just in terms of staying grounded, it's okay to take a step back. I think oftentimes youth advocates, they find themselves that they have to constantly work on their issue, and they have to constantly be taking strides in advocating for their issue. And I feel like they feel if they're not doing that 100% or 24/7, then they may feel some guilt. They're like, okay, then why am I doing this in the first place? Obviously there's people out here who probably care about this more than I do. Why am I the one who's doing this? I'm probably going to make a mistake. It's just kind of a tunnel of just like not good thoughts that definitely develop. So I personally feel taking a step back is 100% okay. Like I mentioned before, you're advocating, you're really trying to be an expert on the subject, and that comes over time. That doesn't ever happen overnight, or even a short period of time at all. So it's definitely important to give yourself some space to take a step back and kind of remind yourself, this is why I'm doing this. These are the people that I'm doing it for. I'm doing this for me, and it's important to take care of myself so, you are able to continue advocating for that issue.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about taking a step back, because that's definitely what I think about every time I'm doubting myself, whether that's in advocacy work, but also it can be in school or my own personal work and stuff like that. So I always ask myself, like, what do I want my world to look like? And this was especially important when I was developing my policy memo on sulfur dioxide emissions. And I really had to think, like, throughout all the research process and all of that I was doing, what did I really want my end goal to look like? I had the ability to write or really reach whatever goal I wanted to. So my policy was a little bit lofty, and but I was okay with that because I'm like, this is my advocacy work. I'm taking ownership of that. And this is what I want my world to look like. So always coming back to that and really like empowering myself is important. But then one of our guest speakers who was in our webinars for the YAM program talked about when you walk into the room for our congressional meetings with our Congress representatives, House of Representatives, you want to be the expert in the room. And I am a competitive person. I'm like, absolutely nobody is gonna be more intelligent on this topic than me. And I'm sure there are more smart people out there than me when it comes to sulfur dioxide, but I still was pushing myself, like, I want to be the expert. I want to be the expert. I can do more research. I can learn more. And that was so important for me. So really, like, having a couple mantras, maybe like asking yourself a couple questions, is super important in terms of figuring out your why and your true purpose, but behind your passions.
Yeah, that's awesome. Super quickly, we're going to ask our last question before we move on to answer your guys' questions. So how would you go about getting more youth in Kentucky to become involved in advocacy?
And if anybody has any questions for us, please go ahead and put them in the chat box, and then Adrienne will like ask them after we're done with this question. But I think my one thing, it's kind of broad, but communication and trust is super important. Kentucky's a really interesting state. We have a lot going on, and I think a lot like environmentally going on. We have Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky, Northern, like everywhere is so different. So really tapping into a community mindset and saying, like, what is something local that we can really focus on just to get people introduced to grassroots organizing or even advocacy work in general, instead of moving straight on to like statewide or national projects, which can be very intimidating.
Yeah, and just super quickly, like me and Grace were kind of mentioning, there's really not a lot of whole promoting of mentoring programs at all. Most people don't know even what mentoring programs are, or know like what an accurate representation of like a mentor and mentee relationship is. So I think just promoting mentoring programs, getting yourself out there, as well as also kind of advertising the different facets of like what a mentor and mentee relationship can be.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. We have a couple of questions from the audience. I think we're only going to be able to take one or two because we're almost at time. But the first question that we have is, how do mentoring programs excite young people about doing advocacy if they aren't already interested in the topic?
I can share first just from a personal experience. In high school, for Louisville Girls Leadership, we had multiple ideas wrapped into one session. And so it might be self-care, it might be politics, it might be, I don't know, like a lot of other things going on, healthcare, things like that, just issues that were pertinent to women. And I didn't know about a lot of them. I really only knew about self-care. And so it took a lot of empowerment. Like, I needed the older high school mentors, and then like the mentors who were leading the whole program, to really show me, like, you are a human being, you deserve X, Y, and Z. And it boosted my self-confidence to where I could stop looking at only self-care, because that's really what I needed at the time, but I didn't know that I needed other topics as well to really bolster who I am as a person. So I think boosting self-confidence through trust exercises and stuff is always awesome.
Yep, and just agreeing with Grace, the whole, I feel oftentimes youth, like we were talking about, don't feel like they're credited enough to be involved in youth advocacy, so they're not going to be excited about it in the first place. So I feel like taking that step and, you know, empowering youth and telling them like, hey, you can do this, and, you know, kind of letting them tap into, you know, the issues that they care about personally, and just letting them know like, hey, you can be a huge change maker. And, you know, just providing resources, I feel like then that would facilitate lots of youth advocacy.
Wonderful. Unfortunately, we are at time. However, if we did not get to your questions, we will make sure that they are passed on to Grace and Kendall. I want to thank you both so much for being with us today, and thank everyone for attending today's webinar. I have this last slide on here to just let you know that if you're interested in connecting with Kendall or Grace, you can go ahead and email me, and we will make sure that everyone is able to connect. Thank you again so much. We're so excited. If you are interested in learning any more about Youth Advocates for Mentoring, about the work of Mentors Advocacy and Policy Team, please visit our website, please email us, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care, everyone.